Welcome to Enlightened, the enlightened journey of life. I am your host, Jen Hamilton, and it is an honor to have you here. I am a conscious life coach and women's empowerment mentor, and I activate a potent level of self and soul inquiry with my clients, which initiates deep and lasting transformation in all areas of their lives. I am here for the full human experience, authentically and audaciously sharing my magic with the world. On this podcast, we're all about mastering life on the way to enlightenment. And as we are here having a human experience, we might as well embrace it all. We play in the space of what is real and tangible, just as much as we play in the space of esoteric and metaphysical. You'll be ignited by deep conversation, whether through my own personal musings, interviews with incredible thought leaders around the world, and everyday divine humans sharing their soulful stories. Thank you for being on this journey. Let's dive in. Hello, beautiful soul. Just to let you know that listener discretion is advised for this episode and to be mindful if there are kids around as it contains adult themes. Welcome to another episode of the Enlightened podcast. Today I am joined by Diane Nnaemeka, who is a holistic consultant based in Thailand. Her focus area is grief, and she believes that grief is an overlooked and misunderstood concept in some ways, and is here to shed light on this topic so people can understand it more. Diane leads workshops in person and online and has a program called Moving Through It, where she identifies key losses in your life and helps you to move forward with a more holistic understanding of it. In this episode, we talk about death and grief, so please be advised through this trigger warning that it may be a sensitive topic for some people to listen to. So without further ado, let's dive in. Diane, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I'd love to hear from you. First of all, what is it that inspires you to get up every morning?
Man, so I think throughout the year it's been different things, but now I'm set on gratitude. Like just gratitude. I can open my eyes and then gratitude. Like most days here it's pretty sunny, even though it's kind of cold right now, and I'm not really a fan of the cold, but the sun is helping. The sun is helping. Just being grateful for the things I do have, because I think we tend to forget these things because we're all blessed in different ways. So that's been what's been motivating me the past few weeks for sure.
I love that. Gratitude is such an important part of my day and my children's day, and my partner. We're always checking in with each other at random times of the day what we're grateful for. And I love that that's the first thing that comes to your mind when you feel inspired to get up every morning. So that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is it that you do and how do you help people in the world?
Okay, so this year I have started out as a holistic consultant, and my focus area is on grief because, like you said, it is something that we need to have more conversations about. So as far as grief, just being able to identify it, like what it means, because I've realized not everyone actually knows what it means. So identifying it, what kind of losses you have in your life, understanding it more, really processing it. Processing it is, it can be a little rough, but I think that's part of grief and moving through it. And then after the processing part, just being able to understand it more in your life and have a more holistic view of it, because it's not just this and then it's not just that. It's everything. It's the good times, it's the bad times, it's the harder parts of it. And then even now, like for me, for example, I'm in a easier flow right now, but it's because I've put in the work. So this is how I help people. I've done workshops and open to one-on-one, and it's been really cool so far, actually.
Yeah, beautiful. And, when I personally think of grief, I think of like, oh gosh, I don't want to feel that because of how deep the feelings run with it and how heavy or dark, if we want to give it, any sort of a texture, it might be, this dense texture in your chest, for example. When, especially in the Western world, when we associate, death, for example, and the grief that you experience with that, I certainly feel in the Western world, especially that our relationship with death and therefore life is, quite different to other areas of the world.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from you. What even is grief, and what do people experience when, as sort of like a broad thing? I mean, obviously everyone experiences grief in different ways, but what
Yeah.
does that look like, generally to people?
So grief by definition is loss. And the way that I've been understanding it and what I want to work with is helping people identify the big losses in life, because, it's not just physical death. It can be the end of a relationship, it can be the ending of friendships. Like, I've experienced these things and they have affected me. I won't say on the exact same level as a physical death, but it's still very much a heavy thing. So these kinds of losses, like loss of property, loss of lifestyle, even like moving, and kind of the grieving process of missing where you were before. So by definition, this is what I think grief is and how I've experienced it.
Yeah, beautiful. And how does it generally like look and show up for people? Like, what are some of the classic things that people go through when they, obviously, there's the stages of grief. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Okay. So actually it's an interesting thing. The first time I did a workshop back in September, and we were just talking about it, just like what it is in our lives. What I realized is that for a lot of people, it's things that we've suppressed over some time. Like, not everyone is comfortable talking about it, or maybe after something happened, you don't even immediately go into grieving it. Like, for a lot of people, it just kind of sits and you don't process it. And I was surprised by how many people that was a thing for. So I think that at least initially, I've realized a lot of people don't even deal with it, but then it's like we're not even taught to deal with it. So if you don't know what you're supposed to do, that's how it can just sit for years. And like for me, for example, I can say the biggest loss I experienced in my life, I didn't really deal with it for maybe about 15 years. But for me, it wasn't because I didn't want to. I literally didn't even know what was happening. So I think that's a big thing, really.
Yeah. And through like the incredible work, that you do, and, supporting people through grief, what would you say is sort of the thing that we're missing when it comes to grief? Like, are we missing the, the opportunity to be taught about what grief is and what it feels like and what to expect when we go through grief? Are we missing education around it? Are we missing openness? Like, is it such a private journey that we're taught that it's shameful to be grieving?
Yeah.
What is it, through your experience?
I think it's definitely the openness, because it is something where you feel like you shouldn't talk about it, and, like, this is something I should just deal with by myself. Maybe if I talk to this person about it, they won't want to talk to me anymore. They won't want to talk about it. It'll be too heavy for them. So I think we internalize this a lot, but this is something that can help free you in a way, because it's allowing yourself to have support. Like, this is one of the biggest things with grief, whatever kind of loss you've experienced in your life, being able to have support and know that you're not alone. But the thing about support is that it doesn't always come maybe from the people you would expect and the people you would think. It doesn't mean that if you've gone through something, this friend will definitely be here for you. In my experience, it's actually not true. But at the same time, people do come through for you if you're open about it. But that is a hard part. So I think really having I don't know if I would call it courage, but maybe at some point you'll just get to a point where you're like, I need to talk about this. Or it could just be bubbling, sitting inside for a really long time. And it's not a good feeling either. So I definitely think it's openness.
Yeah. And through your experience, like, if we let that grief that we internalize and push down manifest, and like, what can it manifest into? Like, from your experience, can it make things worse in other areas of people's lives?
Manifest as in you let yourself feel the heavy emotions?
If you don't let yourself feel it, like, can it manifest into dis-ease or pain within the body, or
oh my goodness.
Yeah, tell us about that.
I have a story. I'm like, should I like go into it or should I
Go to
just
the story.
okay. Okay, so this is what year are we in? The end of 2022. Okay. So this was like in 2020, I started having chest pains actually, and it was just like on the left side of my body. And something I learned actually, I'm kind of jumping. I kind of jump in my stories, but so when I was seeing the Ayurvedic doctor, we realized that a lot of things are happening on the left side of my body, and that's like the feminine side. And if you are, I guess, lacking isn't the best word, but if you're just not feeling fulfilled in certain things, like if you don't feel like you're being accepted, if you don't feel like you can be soft and comfortable with people, things like this, it can really manifest with pain on that side. So I started having pain like on the left side of my chest, and then I couldn't breathe properly. It was kind of escalating. And then that's when I started seeing the Ayurvedic doctor. And then in just, I guess, an analysis of my life and my body, realized that because my mom passed a while ago and I hadn't dealt with it. And then that's how it was showing up. Just pain, like just pain here, couldn't breathe properly. So it can definitely show up physically. And I didn't realize it until it happened. And I was like, okay, it's happening. I really need to deal with this because there's no going back now, because it was pretty intense. So definitely can show up physically.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a junkie for metaphysical anatomy, and I've got a textbook on it. And there's a lot of information to say that, yeah, grief produces, like, manifests in the lungs, and so it's so aligned that you had that chest pain that you're experiencing, because it's I mean, essentially everything is energy. Like, all of our feelings and emotions are all energy, and if we don't get them out of the body, if they stay stuck in there, if we push them down, or make them wrong, or not allow them to just be, then they're going to continue to travel through the body and stick somewhere. So that's incredible.
So true.
I love that you touched on community. So why is community so important for people that are moving through grief?
It's so important just because you feel like you can connect with people in this way, because everyone has their issues, everyone has things going on. But like, for an example, when I did my first workshop back in September, that was the first time I'd ever like talked about the grief I experienced in front of a group of people. And then other people were talking about it too. And it's like, oh, we all have these different kinds of experiences, but it's colored our lives in a way where we can relate to one another. And then you feel like you're not alone. And it's just, it feels good to know that you have other people who have similar experiences. And then just having people to talk about it with also, like, you're not alone. You don't have to sit and just be like, no one wants to listen to me. Like, oh, like no one's going to care. Like, no, it's actually not that. You do have to a certain extent, put yourself out there, which I understand can be scary, and maybe you just may not want to. But in doing that, it's really just like opening the door and like letting all these good things come into your life and good people and support in that way. So that's been a great thing about community.
Yeah, beautiful. Yes. What would you say to someone who's, experienced a loss, whether it's a death or, any of the other losses that you mentioned, or any loss, for example? What would you say to them? Like, they know that like what they're in is grief and they're feeling, the discomfort of it. They don't know about, any community that they can have around them. They might not have many friends. They might not have family close by. What are some of the things that they can do to support themselves through this grieving process?
Man, so something that helped me a lot was writing things out and journaling. When I was seeing the Ayurvedic doctor, I was seeing him for about 3 or 4 months, and that was a really big part of it, like journaling things out so you can actually understand initially where you're at, where your thoughts are, because we think a lot and your mind can just be going, but it doesn't. You may not really understand what's going on. Your mind is going, but you don't really understand it. But writing it out and kind of having it on paper, and then you're just like, okay, so this is where I was at, like, for example, in November. And then in December, you look back at where you were in November, and then you see that maybe things have changed. Maybe progress has been made. Progress as in things are feeling lighter and it's not feeling as heavy. So I think journaling, it helps with understanding. It just helps with the processing of it. It really helps a lot.
Absolutely. I'm such a fan of journaling and, whether it's just sort of like free flowing writing, whether
Yeah.
I'm, doing some self-awareness questions or,
Yeah.
one of my favorite journaling practices is fear and love. So what is fear saying and what would love say? So
Wow, I've never
writing
heard of that
down.
one.
Yeah. So writing down like what's really present for me, like if I'm feeling really tense or really anxious, writing down all of the things that fear is saying. And I mean, it could definitely duplicate to grief as well.
Mhm.
What is grief saying at the moment?
Yeah.
Grief is saying, I'm never going to feel better again. Grief is saying, I
Yeah.
can't live my life like this anymore. I'm
Yeah.
never going to be able to go on. I'm
Yeah.
broken. I'm fragmented. I'm wounded. Whatever grief is saying, and then asking, well, what does love say?
Oh
And for some
my
people
gosh.
that might be God, universe, source, or just love, what does love say? Because, when we can find that beautiful place of love in through all of it, love might say, hey, but, you can walk alongside grief. What is it showing
Mm.
you? Love might
Mm.
say, what are you grateful for? Love might
Mm.
say, do you know what? It's part of the human experience to
Yeah.
go through loss and to have these feelings, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I
Yeah.
love that. Fear and
Yeah.
love. Wow. I really
Yeah.
never heard of that. I really like that.
Yeah. And so what is it that like for someone that's not experiencing grief, but they have a loved one that's going through grief,
Mhm.
and if they haven't like experienced grief themselves especially to the depth that their loved one is going through, what
Mhm.
can they do? A lot of people I know just sort of pull back because they're like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't
Yeah.
know if they're trying to push me away. So if
Yeah.
someone hasn't personally dealt with a depth of grief, how can they support someone that is going through that?
Man, okay. So something I have realized, I guess I'm going to talk about at the point when I initially went through my mom passing, something that would have helped me. It would have been literally just having more people around. I think like after someone passes away, maybe there's a period of a few weeks where it's really fresh still and it's new, and then you see family coming through, and this is just how it is. So I'm not really saying that it's really sad, but it is what it is. So after that initial few weeks, and then you're kind of just like, wow, like this is still in my life. Other people have moved on, but I haven't. Just really having more people to consistently check in. And that doesn't mean like you have to ask me a lot of questions about the experience. You could really just sit with me and hear me out. And I understand boundaries because you can't expect people to be there for you in that way all the time. But to have that more, like maybe someone will call you once a week, once every other week, come and sit with you like that helps. And also food. I don't know why food is so
Mm.
nourishing. If someone just brings you food and you're just like, okay, thank you, you're thinking of me. And then you just sit down with them and eat, like that really helps too. And I'm not really sure why, but yeah, just sit down and
Food
eat.
for me is like I have deep, deep roots with food and connection.
Mm,
Especially it reminds me, any sort of food reminds me sitting at the family dinner table or, going
yeah.
to a party and there's always food. Wherever there is connection, there is food. And,
Yes.
I've got an Italian background. So like my middle name is carbohydrates and my blood type is espresso. So to me it's all about the food. I'm like my love language is like, here, let me feed you. Like that's how I show love.
Carbohydrates.
So if I know that there's people coming over, it's like, oh, I have to make something. I have to have food in the house. I have to put on a spread. And it's so funny, like we joke about this one time. It was my sister-in-law's 21st birthday and my partner said to me, he's like, oh, we've been asked to make a cheese platter. And like generally, like he doesn't have Italian in him, so generally it would be like literally a couple of things of cheese and some crackers. And I went to town. I gave him the receipt. He looked at it and he's like, you spent $200 on a cheese platter. I'm like, it is the best cheese platter in the world. For me, it was about like connection. Like people are coming together for a celebration. There needs to be an overflow of food.
Yeah.
And so for me, food is all about, celebration, and it's connection, and
Yeah.
it's comfort, and it's all of those things. My partner and I, we're such foodies. We love going out to eat and
Yeah.
trying different food. And, things have switched a little bit for us because, we have a vegan lifestyle. And so we're getting to know different types of food on different levels, which has been such a fun journey as well, because it's, you get really, really creative on a different level.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people are also interested in our lifestyle, and they're like, well, what do you even eat? And I'm like, oh my gosh, let me cook for you. Like, I can make vegan food because I've had to. And then people are like, wow, this is actually really good. But it's
vegan food can be really good. Like, I went to this Christmas market. Sorry, not to cut you off. I just had to say this. I went to this Christmas market with my friend yesterday, and there was a stall that had vegan brownies. And like, I've had vegan brownies before, and like, hit or miss, but this stall, I don't know what they put in it. I only bought one because I just wanted to go home after. And when I got home and I ate it, I was so pissed off that I only bought one, and this market is done, so I won't be able to go back to this vendor and ever get it again. Vegan food can be really good. I just have to say.
It can be. And do you know what? Like, it kind of has to be, because like there's sort of like a stigma around the fact that there's going to be like no flavor in it or anything like that, or that it's going to be boring. But there is so much flavor and just so much nutrition in it as well, because it's powered by plants. Vegan brownies are the best. You can actually, like, you can make them with beetroot, you can make them with sweet potato, like there's all sorts of things you can make brownies with. But I love that we got talking about brownies through grief. Like, that's if I'm ever going through grief and any of my friends or family are listening, like, just bring me vegan brownies and I'll be okay.
Seriously. That's the bare minimum.
Absolutely. There's this place in Brisbane, it's called Vegan Yum, and they have like the best cakes and pastries, and like it's just you wouldn't even pick that it was vegan. Like, it's just so delicious. Every time we drive past there, we have to stop, and it's so good. My mouth is starting to water now. But yeah, like coming back to grief, like, it's so true, isn't it? Because there's a sense of comfort that we do experience with certain foods. Like when I have pasta, for example, like pasta reminds me of like having pasta as a family growing up. And that was, it was a staple in our household. There's certain foods or certain flavors or textures that you have. And it's like, oh my gosh, this reminds me, or like certain smells, like, there's a certain biscuit that we used to have at my nonna's house, and I don't eat them anymore because they've got like milk in them, but my kids love them and they know them. It's like the nonna biscuits. And even just seeing the packet on the shelf is just like, oh, Nonna, like, I miss going to her house, and she would always get these biscuits out, and it's just so nourishing for the soul. Like, it's that nostalgia piece that just takes you back to a memory, or just enjoying a hot meal or something like that. And so food, is absolutely such a big thing through grief as well, isn't it? Like, I love that, especially like even in the the Western community here, we do think of food, it's like, oh, I need to bake them some meals, because generally, like, to make a meal, there's a lot of effort that goes into it.
Exactly.
You got to think about what you're going to eat, and then you got to have all the things you got to go to the store to buy all of the things and make it. And if someone just turns up with a meal, it's like, oh my God, thank you.
Yes. Like, I think that's a love language of mine. I've realized, like, anytime anyone has made me food, it doesn't even have to be like I'm in love with you. It's just like even friendship love. Like, I just have more appreciation. It just makes me so, so, so happy. Because it's like, oh my gosh, you really went out of your way to like do this for me and like bring this to me. Like, yes.
I have seen, I don't know if it must be on like social media or something, but there's like this thing that goes around where it's like, if you go to your local thrift shop and you buy an old casserole dish, and it's like the casserole dish that gets passed around. So you make a meal for it to someone, you give it to them in that dish. And then when they go to make a meal for someone, they pass the dish on. And this, like, the whole actual dish itself, the ceramic dish with the lid actually gets passed on. It's like it does this, this motion, this circular motion around the community for whoever needs a meal at the time. Yeah. So, I mean, there's always like, oh, like you bring food over and it's not as nice, receiving it in like a, an alfoil tray or like plastic or something like that. But if it's like in a proper casserole dish, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you love me.
Yeah. You appreciate me. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how is it that you work with people? Like, how do they find you? What kind of work do you do with people? What does that look like?
So for me, so since I've been teaching, my style is very similar in that I make presentations, I make worksheets, resources. Maybe I'll reference videos that I've seen before, and it's kind of just a sit down session, so the workshops I've done, most of them have been in person. So in this way, it's kind of like there's just a group of us, we're in a space, and then I also have my laptop just to reference things because I forget things a lot. So I'm like, I need something to like keep me on track. But just go through it, just kind of bring up the topic, because even in grief, there are different topics you can talk about. Like I didn't realize it until I actually sat down and started thinking of it. Like there's so much to unpack with grief. There's so much. And it's not all so heavy where you're just like, oh my gosh, like this hurts. Like it really isn't, but there's just different things to unpack. So in the workshop space, so we sit, I kind of I introduce the topic, and then I go through the points I want to bring up, and then I always really, this is one of my favorite parts, leaving spaces and times for questions or for people to chime in with whatever they want to say, because really I've learned so much, and like if I learn something in this, then I'm going to bring it into something else I'm doing. And it's just, or even if someone brought up something interesting here, I'm going to bring it up here or whatever. So it honestly, it's one of my favorite parts. It's kind of like being in school, and then I don't really have to stay like for long periods of time, but I'm still learning, and this is great. So
Yeah, I love that. What would you say we can do, like if we're not going through grief? Is there anything that you can do to prepare yourself? Because, we all go through loss at some point. There's always going to be something that happens, whether it's the death of a loved one, or, the loss of a job, or, having to move house all of a sudden, or, loss of a pet or something. What is it that we can do so that when we are essentially catapulted into this state of grief that's generally unexpected, what is it that we can kind of have ready to go to be like, if I'm going through this is what I'm going to need?
I want to start off by saying two things. So one, it's really hard to ever prepare for it, especially if you're a person and you are let's say you're a full grown adult, and then no one around you, even no one you're close to, has ever dealt with it. You may not even know that it's something you should be preparing for. You may not even it may not be in your realm of knowing, your realm of awareness. So in that way, it's hard to prepare for. But then I also want to say it's kind of knowing yourself, like going within, because let's just say even difficulties in general, let's say it's not grief, just hard times in general. How do you go through it? Maybe you're someone where it's better for you to sit and journal. Maybe you're someone where it's good for you to go and exercise. Different ways of handling hard times in general will probably there'll be a correlation between that and then how you handle grief. Like for me, now that I look at my life, I think that for me, handling grief is definitely journaling, because I like doing it, and I can write for hours and it's not hard. Journaling, going out for a walk, and then also just being by myself, just sitting, processing, understanding it. And this is how I deal with hard times in general as well. And then of course, certain people who I trust, and going to them with questions or concerns or anything that I'm confused about as well. But yeah, I think that's kind of a way of going about it.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's the thing, you don't know what it's going to be like. I remember when my ex-father-in-law was transitioning out of life, and he'd been quite unwell, and he was dying of cancer. We were nursing him through it, and it was expected, and in the days before he actually passed, he'd gone into a coma state, and we knew when it was coming, we knew that it was not far away. And I remember the very moment, I went to, like we were all sort of gathered around his bed, and he'd been chain stoking for a while, very labored breath. And I went to sit on his, by his side and check his pulse, because we thought he had gone, and he just let his last breath out. And it was so beautiful. One tear then just dropped out of his eye, and he was gone. And
wow.
I remember, like, it was such a beautiful experience to be there for him and to, hold space as he transitioned and journeyed. But then I still went into shock, and it was the first time I'd ever been, around someone that had, just completed their journey of life. And I didn't know what to expect. And I really took it hard. And I said, because it was my partner at the time, it was his father. And I'd said to him, I'm going to be the strong one. I'm going to be your rock. This is going to be really hard for you. I'll do everything. And he ended up supporting me through it. He was a lot stronger for me, because I really struggled with it. I didn't know how to process the grief of it, even though we knew what was coming. Like, you're exactly right. Like, you can't ever prepare for it because you don't know how it's going to be. And I think it's so important, exactly what you said, have these practices in place that are the things that support you in life in general. So whether it's exercise, journaling, going for a walk, dancing's such a beautiful thing to do. Just knowing that you can just go and be in nature and be in the silence of things, and that it's okay to feel of your feelings. I think if you are that way generally in life, then you're going to have that memory as soon as the thing that launches you into that state of grief. You're going to have those things as part of your default setting anyway, if you've got those foundations. But you're right. Like, there's nothing that can prepare you, but you can definitely have those supportive things around you, and, keep in mind that you can walk alongside grief. Like, you still get to exist with happiness. You still get to feel contentment in life. You still get to experience joy and laughter whilst experiencing grief as well. It's not just, I'm grieving and that's all that there is to me. You're not defined by your grief.
Yeah. Woo.
Yeah.
That is 100% true. But it's like, I don't know why. I guess part of the reason why in society, not every society, but maybe more so in Western society, that it's like this is initially we're just so just scared of it. Like, people are very scared of death, which I understand. But then it's like, if it's going to happen to everyone anyway, having more of just a holistic view on it, like it's just a part of life, can really help. But we're just so scared of death. It's like, oh my gosh, death. Or if it's not physical death, it's like, oh my gosh, like the loss of this, or this person isn't in my life anymore. My life isn't like this anymore. And it's just, how do we as a society get out of this?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I've been speaking into this for so long. It's like, I think it's the relationship. Like, I feel like there's a correlation between the experience that we have, or like the idea of death. Yeah, is very much a reflection of our life. Like, the one thing that is guaranteed in life is that we will experience death. Yeah. If there's one thing in the world that we can guarantee, is that it's going to end. And, for a lot of the time, we don't know when it's going to end. And, the thing about human psychology is the fact that, we're literally here to survive, where we do everything we possibly can to preserve our survival. Yeah. And because we are emotional creatures, we feel so deeply. And so the relationship that we have with death is a reflection of the relationship that we have with life. And so, for me personally, my own personal beliefs, I truly believe that, it is a journey. It's we die from this human form of life, but our soul continues to live on. Yeah. And, we experience the spirit world, or another dimension, or another reality, whatever it could be. Yeah. And so I truly believe that our souls are eternal. And so that gives me definitely comfort in that. And, having gone through, the loss of people around me before, and, I have a lot of friends as well who are psychic mediums. So I know that, they have incredible gifts to be able to communicate with people that have passed over, to the point where they've said things that literally no one else could have known, that it has to be that person, Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I'm very interested, in past life regressions, and I want to study that next
Ooh.
year. And, sort of talking about multiple lives that we have and realizing that we are on a journey and that we are here, for such a short period of time. I think the relationship that I have built with life and then therefore death itself is quite healthy. It's healthy for me. In my
Mm.
view of the world, I feel like I'm quite comfortable with it. At the same time, any sort of a death still, like, it still stings.
Yeah.
It still hurts, the thought
Yeah.
of it. Like, to think of, say, for example, losing my parents, my partner, my children, my siblings, my close
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
that there is absolute devastation and heartache there.
Yeah.
But it's also like, okay, well, it's an acceptance as well. It's a surrender to saying I
Acceptance.
can't be defined by the fear of losing
Yeah.
someone. I mean, I'm talking specifically about, the death of a person here, but it could be in any regard.
Yeah.
I understand that it could happen at any time, but I can't live my life in fear of it happening, or I
Yeah.
can't define myself by, the person that I will be as I move through that grief process.
Mm.
And, I've been around, the death of children. I've been around, sudden death. I've been around suicide. There's been a lot there, and none of it's easier.
Yeah,
It's
no.
still, and, for me, having, anytime I hear of anyone, I heard of, two people passing in the last week,
Mm.
which were, self-inflicted. And, that really just brought me home. Like, it was like, wow, okay, let me just check in with what my values are in life. Am I actually living in alignment with what I want to experience whilst I'm here? Am I being the best mum, the best partner? Am I showing up in my business the best way that I can? Am I supporting my
Mm.
clients the best way that I can to live a
Mm.
full life? Because we just don't know when it is. And I feel like it holds a mirror up.
Yes.
You know?
Oh my gosh. Actually, I want to add on to that and say, like, for example, earlier this year, I lost a very close cousin. And but something in the weeks afterwards, it made me realize I really want to live my life. Like, I really, really want to go for what I want to go for. It's like, literally, she passed in July. And at some point later that month, or in August, I was like, okay, so now I'm going to start doing business stuff because this is what I want to do. And I don't want to waste a second. I don't want to live in fear. Fear really holds us back, unfortunately. And I feel like I don't really have much room in my life to really be living in fear anymore. Not that fear doesn't come up, but I refuse to just sit in it and live in it. Like, that's just a no. And then
Exactly.
also, sorry, I forget things, so I have to share this now. So I went to a drum circle about maybe like 2 months ago. And so the drum circle was over, and then I was talking to this guy, and he actually came to Thailand to spread the ashes of his good friend who passed away while here. But he was saying that no one should actually feel bad for this friend because he's kind of been accepting death for a while. Like, he's been saying he's ready to go for a while. Like, this man was in his 70s, so I'm assuming his friend was also maybe 70s, older, somewhere around that age range. And he was saying, like, no, like, my friend has been saying for a while, like, I could pass any day and I'm happy. Like, let's go. Like, he was literally like, let's go. Like, I've lived a good life. I'm happy with things. And so the man that I met, when he was talking about his friend, he was like, happiest story ever. Like, he misses his friend, obviously, but it's not something where it's like all this despair. Like, he's been ready to go for a while. And then after hearing that, I was like, that's so inspiring. Like, I want to live my life like that. And then I would prefer many, 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 many years in the future just being like, okay, yeah, I lived a good life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm the same. I'm like, I've got plenty more to do here. I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of the teachings. I have a lot of love and respect for Ram Dass. Have you heard of Ram Dass?
This name sounds familiar, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
he's incredible. He is now passed, and you'll have to look him up. There's some shows about him on Netflix. He's also, got shows on Gaia and stuff. And you can either like YouTube his work as well. And his teachings are just beautiful. He talks about going to this place called Soul Land, and, you can visit this place, where it's just you and your soul through a deep state of meditation, or even working with plant medicine. He speaks very openly about working with psilocybin mushrooms to get to this place. And, he writes a mantra, I am loving awareness. And, that's who he is beyond the human experience. And no doubt when he passed, it would have been an incredible experience for him, because he just knew to his core that his soul is eternal, and that, his body had started going downhill. I think it was a stroke that he had experienced, or I think it was a stroke or an aneurysm or something, and so his body wasn't working at its fullest capacity, and he was still so grateful for it, because he was just able to just experience all that it had to offer. And, it was interesting because hearing of his passing, I felt very peaceful. I think it was, it would have been over a year ago he passed, but I felt very peaceful for him, because I knew that his soul would be at peace with it. But then there's a lot of people I know that, if they'd passed, they wouldn't have been at peace with it yet. And, essentially, I think we're all on our own soul's journey here.
That's true.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's so important to be talking about these things, to have these wide open conversations, to say, hey, look, this is what grief is. Everyone experiences it in a different way, and there is no right and wrong way to do grief.
Yeah. Just try your best, and try to understand the different, just the different processes of it. Like now, like maybe it just happened and it's really fresh, but at some point it won't feel as heavy. It won't feel as new. And even if this loss is always there, it's not always going to feel like this. It's not always going to feel so heavy. And man, it's honestly, it's been one of the best parts of working in this. I feel like I'm freeing myself.
I love that. Isn't that incredible? And I love that, about the work that we do as, coaches, consultants, healers, facilitators, light workers, whatever you want to call it, is that we go through the stuff and then we teach people through it. And I think, it's so much better when we're relatable in this way. Imagine, going to a grief counselor, for example, who'd never experienced grief. It's like, you don't get me. But someone that's gone through it like yourself, and it's like, hey, look, I've been there, done that, got the fridge magnet. I know the way through it. Hold my hand and I'll take you with me, Yeah. So I think I love the work that you're doing, and I'm so grateful that you've joined me for a chat. I've got one last question for you before we wrap up. And obviously, I'll link to all of the work that you do and how people can contact you in the show notes. But Diane, in your view of the world, what is the meaning of life?
What? Oh my gosh, I was not prepared for this question. Now I feel like I'm not going to be satisfied with my answer. Wow, the meaning of life. But I do think about this. The meaning of life, oh man, really just to try your best and to not do it alone, being with people. For example, yesterday I caught up on Google Meet with friends, because we used to hang out a lot, but some friends moved to different countries. And my heart was so happy yesterday, and the reason I was so happy yesterday is because I spent the whole day with people that I really cared about, whether it was in person with one friend or on Google Meet with another group of friends. So I think really just trying your best and having community, it's maybe some people, because I can't speak for everyone, so maybe some people really can go life alone, but I'm not one of them. I have no desire to, now that I understand how much community and support really means to me. So just build a team, like a soul team, just people to go through life together with. So for me, that's the meaning of life.
That's amazing. I love that so much. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode and sharing your experience of grief and the amazing work that you do. And for the listeners out there, yes, we will link to all of the ways in which you can get in touch with Diane in the show notes. Thank you so much, Diane.
Woo!
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlightened podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is Enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlightened and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.